80s and 90s that relate to managers. There's Paul Bearer. Of course, he was very influential in The Undertaker's career, making The Undertaker a 5-time WWE champion and making The Undertaker one of the greatest superstars of the 80s and 90s. I think that Paul Bearer is very deserving of that. Paul Ellering is probably deserving of the #1 spot. The thing about these lists that you compile, like the greatest superstars, the 50 greatest superstars in WWE history, and the top 15 or 20 greatest wrestling managers of all time, is a lot of controversy can come from it because everybody out there has a different opinion when it comes to a list of compilation, and I think that over the years we have seen that. We saw that with the 50 greatest superstars, which we have previously reviewed here on HEW Entertainment Variety Radio and a previous audio commentary available in our archives, and we're going to see that with the list that WWE.com has published about the greatest wrestling managers of all time. In my opinion, the greatest wrestling manager of all time is either Jimmy Hart or Bobby Eaton, because Bobby Eaton managed, of course, the legendary Andre the Giant, who had a memorable match with Hulk Hogan, which Bobby Eaton was very influential in WrestleMania 3 in front of 93,000 fans. And then you had Jimmy Hart, who was such a big part of Hulk Hogan's career, guiding the Hulk Hogan to many WWE championships, and he was a very influential part in both WWE and WCW, and a Hall of Famer. Bobby Eaton, respectively, too, is a Hall of Famer. Virtually all the managers from the 80s and 90s went on to become WWE Hall of Famers, even the Dr. of Style Slick. But I think that if you were going to put the title of #1 wrestling manager, you'd have to give it to at least Jimmy Hart or Bobby Eaton, definitely, because of their influential roles in the careers of Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. But like I said, there's a lot of controversy that can come from a list of the top 15 or 20 greatest wrestling managers of all time, and WWE.com have their opinion, and you are encouraged to go to Facebook.com/WWE and Twitter.com/WWE and tell them if you agree or disagree with the list. Who do you think should be in the #1 spot? Now, number 2 here in my list, I have ranked a female as the #2 greatest wrestling manager of all time, or at least one of them, Sunny Tammy Stitch, who is still being involved very heavily with the independents, still doing interviews and what have you. A recent WWE Hall of Famer, the 2011 class, featured Sunny going into the WWE Hall of Fame. She was very influential in the careers of people like the Body Donnas. She was also very influential in the careers of people like the Legion of Doom when LOD made that transition from the original Legion of Doom into LOD 2000. I think Sunny's involvement with WWE, no matter if she managed someone or not, deserves a lot of credit. I think that Sunny was able to make the Body Donnas look absolutely phenomenal back in 95, 96, and she guided the Body Donnas to several tag team championships. And who will ever forget Sunny's run with the legendary tag team Burt and Billy Gunn, the Smoking Gun? She also guided them to several tag team championships in their career. I'll never forget the work the Smoking Guns did together as a tag team back in the 90s, capturing many WWF tag team titles, and Sunny was very influential in that. No matter who Sunny managed, the thing about Sunny was, no matter who she managed, she specialized in managing tag teams. She also managed Chris Candido in both WCW and ECW as a singles competitor. But no matter who she managed, she was able to guide them to several tag team titles, not just once, but on several different occasions. And the Body Donnas and the Smoking Guns are perfect examples of that. Sunny was able to sell. She was able to sell her look. She was able to sell a pay-per-view. Who will ever forget that bubble bath promo she did for the '96 Royal Rumble? There are so many career highlights of Sunny that I could talk about here, but I'm just going to talk about her tag team career. She didn't do much with the Legion of Doom back in '98 at WrestleMania 14. She guided them to the #1 contender spot at the 1998 Unforgiven pay-per-view, the first pay-per-view after WrestleMania 14 from Boston. But I think that Sunny definitely did a lot, and her specialty was She was able to sell, and she was able to sell in tag teams, and I think that's what most of her credibility came from. You know, back in the 90s, sex sold with wrestling, and it's still selling today. But Sunny was definitely one of the original divas, with the exception of a few. When back in 91, 92, the only one you really had to rely on to sell looks was someone like Miss Elizabeth, who was very influential in the Mega Powers run to the top, and very influential in the feud between the Mega Powers that took place in Trump Plaza at WrestleMania 5. But Sunny definitely deserves at least the number 2 or number 3 spot in perhaps the greatest wrestling managers of all time, because she was very influential in the careers of people like the Body Donnas and of course the Smoking Guns. But like I said, the key thing about Sunny was she had a specialty of guiding tag teams to more than one tag team championship on more than one occasion. Now, she's noted for managing people like Chris Candido in both the ECW and WCW during Candido's runs for both companies that were at war with WWE, but I think that definitely her credibility came from managing tag teams and guiding them to the top. A number of different managers have been able to manage some of the greatest tag teams of all time. Paul Ellering guided the Legion of Doom to tag team titles in virtually every organization they were involved in, but Sunny's involvement with tag teams like the Smoking Guns and the Body Donnas have been heavily documented on WWE programming from time to time. She was recently inducted into the 2011 class of Hall of Famers, which also saw Shawn Michaels, Abdullah the Butcher, and many other great Hall of Famers go into the prestigious Hall of Fame, which is graced by less than 100 individuals. Also here on my list, I have included Rena Mero, better known to the WWE fans as Sable, for her involvement with Mark Mero back in the early 90s. I think one of the best runs for Mark Mero came when he was the original Wildman, and they were really trying to sell Sable as a wildcat character, and then she made that transition from being a manager into an in-ring competitor and became the first WWF Women's Champion in over 10 or 15 years when she became the WWF Women's Champion at the 1998 Survivor Series Deadly Game when she defeated Jacqueline. I think Sable was one of those individuals who made a very noticeable transition from being just a valet and manager into an in-ring competitor, and many people would follow in her footsteps. Of course, the legendary Trish Stratus would make the same transition in from being a manager. I don't know why I didn't include Trish Stratus as one of the greatest wrestling managers of all time, probably because she didn't do much in the way of managing before she made that transition into being an in-ring competitor, but definitely Trish Stratus followed in the footsteps of Sable, because Sable was able to make that transition from being an influential manager into an in-ring competitor. She also feuded with Mark Mero and Luna Vachon, who managed Bam Bam Bigelow back in the early 90s. She definitely deserves to be included on that list, but Sable definitely was one of probably the greatest wrestling managers of all times in terms of valets. Definitely Sable, Sunny, and Miss Elizabeth are probably 3 of the greatest female managers of all time, and definitely Sable was one of the first valets to make a very noticeable transition, and notable transition, noticeable and notable both, from being a valet into an in-ring competitor. She did it before Sunny did it. I think she's had more matches definitely than Sunny has, to her credit. Now, Sunny has wrestled before on occasion, but Sable definitely made that transition from being a valet into an in-ring competitor and became something more than Sunny did. Sunny has never been a WWF Women's Champion, but Sable definitely has that to her credit. And the fact that she made that transition, definitely a lot of people followed in her footsteps. Trish Stratus is a perfect example of that. Terry Reynolds is ranked here definitely for her work with people like Meat of PMS and the Hardys, of course, in the late 90s, but most of all, she's been known for managing Goldust in the early 90s, 95, 96. She definitely guided Goldust to a number of wonderful championships in his career, most notably his run as the Intercontinental Champion back in the 90s when he had feuds with people like Ahmed Johnson over the Intercontinental title, and The Undertaker. And the Ultimate Warrior has to be included there as well. In the early 90s, Terry Reynolds was definitely very influential in the career of Dustin Rhodes, better known to the WWE fans as Goldust. She guided him to an Intercontinental Championship. She also guided him to main event status. He even had an opportunity to main event several pay-per-views against Shawn Michaels and several Raw shows against Shawn Michaels. And the ironic thing was, the match was for the WWF Championship. She's been very influential, of course, in the career of the Hardys. Many people believe that if it wasn't for Terry Runnels, the Hardys probably would have never amounted to anything. They were incredible stars right now in TNA wrestling. They were incredible stars in the WWE, and it all started for them because of this Terry Runnels Invitational they had back in the late 90s. When, of course, the winner of the ladder match and the winner of the tournament would obtain the services of Terry Reynolds. The Hardys defeated Edge and Christian in that ladder match, and of course that ladder match is said to be the ladder match that put the Hardys on top of the tag team division, and she guided the Hardys to several tag team titles in her career. Terry Reynolds is no stranger to championship gold. She also made a very noticeable transition from being a valet into an in-ring competitor. We didn't see much in the way of in-ring competition from Terry Reynolds. Her managing career definitely is more outstanding than her in-ring career, but I think that definitely her work with Dustin Rhodes was very outstanding, and of course that divorce angle has to be included in there as well. They took a real-life angle and emphasized on the divorce of Terry Reynolds and Goldust, and their daughter was involved in that angle as well. She also made several appearances in the early 90s to coincide with the whole Goldust angle on Monday Night Raw. I remember seeing it. I think Dakota is between the ages of 16 and 17 now, but I remember watching her as a little girl when I used to watch it back in the 90s. I also had the privilege of interviewing Terry Reynolds, and I can speak from personal experience and say that she is a wonderful individual for her contributions to the wrestling business, and it's beyond me why she's not a WWE Hall of Famer just yet. Definitely she is a future Hall of Famer, to say the very least. And I can see her being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame probably within the next 5 or 6 years. She was also known for several backstage interviews when she became a backstage interviewer after she got out of the ring and stopped managing for several years. Let's see who else I have included here on this list. Paul Ellering, of course, was very influential in the careers of the Legion of Doom. He guided them to virtually every tag team championship in every organization the Legion of Doom were a part of. And what more needs to be said about someone like Paul Ellering? When you can guide a tag team like the Legion of Doom to stardom and allow them to capture every tag team title in every company they're a part of, from WWE to WCW to AWA to tag team